What's up, gamers? Hey, all. I just wanted to make my first ever team builder. I've never done this before, but I find them super interesting when other people do them, so I figured I'd give it a shot. This is for my week 7 matchup of the TPL. I'm going up against the Red Spark Vikavolts, and they're coached by, give me one second, uh, Dolphins, I believe is what he goes by. And so this is actually a very important battle for me because it's it's going to be a make or break if we want to try and make playoffs. I think. I know it's only my second battle in the league, but the team that I'm taking over for already battled this team once and lost to them. We're in the same division, so we played twice this season, but I only get one battle against them. And currently, they're at the top of our division, but it's still super close. And none of the teams have really broken away at this point. And so, if we can win this, we have just as good of a shot as anybody at making the playoffs. But if we lose, we're in not as good of a situation because they really could take control of the division at that point. So I put a lot of work into this. We don't have any real crazy sets because I think we have to take this one super serious. Just if we want to shot at the playoffs this early in the season, we don't want to ruin our chances that early. But so they've got a couple of super threatening Pokemon, especially for my team. So the Pokemon that I'm very nervous about are Flapple, Mamoswine, and Miltank. I think are the three that I'm most worried about. Flapple is terrifying. I'm expecting it to be something like Yachi Berry or Life Orb. I expect that. I think that's the scariest thing to have Dynamax in front of me because it gets the hustle ability. And so when it Dynamaxes, it gets those boosts to power without having to worry about missing, and it's crazy strong. And if it's Airstream, it could be super, super scary for me because a fast Flapple can pretty much just run through my entire team. So we need a couple of answers to make sure that it doesn't just sweep us if it gets a max airstream off of acrobatics. Mamoswine is very scary. I'm expecting either a focus sash or like a choice band, choice scarf. I think scarf makes a lot of sense in this matchup, but so does focus sash. It kind of just depends on what they're using it for. That's just very scary because if it's scarfed, it outspeeds all of my Pokemon. And if it's sashed, it's still going to do a ton of damage with things like Icicle Crash or Earthquake. And then Miltank, I think, is just scary because it's super unpredictable and very fast. People always seem to underestimate Miltank, and I've learned that's a very bad idea because you really never know what Miltank can do. It can be super annoying with things like Thunderwave, Seismic Toss, and Milk Drink, or it can be super offensive with things like Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Body Slam, and all of that. And so I'm expecting that to be Sap Sipper this week. It could be Thick Fat. That wouldn't surprise me if it's going to be their answer to like my Ninetales, but I think Sap Sipper makes a lot of sense when I have Leafeon and Whimsicott on my team. Uh, Comfey is an interesting mod for this matchup because if you notice, Flapple's their only grass type, so beyond that, they don't have a ton of answers to my Gastrodon, but Comfey gets priority Giga Drains with its ability Triage, which allows it to have priority on all of its healing moves. And so that could be another threat to Gastrodon. But it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't come to this matchup just because my Bronzong is such a good answer to it. Comfey doesn't get any moves that can really touch a Bronzong. Its most common moves are like Fairy, Grass, Psychic, none of which can really touch a Bronzong at all. And I've noticed that they don't really bring Comfey a whole lot, so it would make sense that they might leave it behind. But I also think it's probably their best answer to my Heracross because priority Draining Kiss is nice and it just outspeeds, which is one of the few Pokemon that outspeeds my Heracross naturally. Uh, Garbodor could be very annoying just because it gets very good move coverage as well. It gets things like Stomping Tantrum and Seed Bomb, and so it can hit almost everything on my team super hard this week. I think my only real safe switch-ins again are Bronzong and Heracross, and so that thing is very scary. If it has something like an Expert Belt, very scary. It could have an Assault Vest, that wouldn't surprise me. It could even be like weak armor shenanigans where it tries to outspeed all of my Pokemon after I hit it with a physical attack. So Garbodor is kind of a threat as well. Incineroar, always a scary Pokemon. Intimidate, not fun for Heracross. I think it's really a big threat to my Bronzong, which you'll see later is a very important part of my team this week. But Incineroar just likes to come in. It can be support with like Parting Shot, U-Turn, or it can just be super offensive like Flare Blitz, Darkest Lariat, Knockoff, all that kind of stuff. And I think if I remember correctly, that's their kill leader this season. So I need to be aware of it. But Gastron's a relatively good answer to Incineroar just because Sticky Hold and things like that. Finally, Rotom. Rotom is super difficult to prepare for just because it can be one of any different forms, and it really changes how you play around it depending on what form it is. And so I have some general answers to Rotom, but it's just so unpredictable that it's definitely a threat. It can run Nasty Plot or it can run choice items. It can be offensive or bulky. It's really, really unpredictable, and I think that could also be a threat. So basically, my opponent's team, all threats, varying degrees, but very, very scary matchup. Not looking forward to this matchup at all. But I think there are Pokemon that could Dynamax this week. I think the only ones that are really likely are Flapple, Mamoswine, and maybe Miltank. I could see like Garbodor and Incineroar, but I don't think they're as good. Dynamax, maybe even Garbodor because it has good coverage, but I don't think it's super likely just because I have generally good answers, and Flapple can hit all of my Pokemon for super, super good damage with a combination of Sucker Punch, Acrobatics, and Dual Stab. So my team this week, we'll start off with Bronzong. I'm bringing a Trick Room Bronzong because if you notice, his team, the slowest Pokemon that they have is Incineroar at 60 base speed, and I have three Pokemon that are slower than that naturally, Bronzong, Gastron, and Dragalge. And so I don't think they'll be expecting the Trick Room this week just because those are my only slow Pokemon. Everything else I have is relatively fast. But I think Trick Room's super, super good in this matchup because Gastrodon and Dragalge hit everything very, very hard in general. And so they're both very big threats. And Bronzong is going to be just a defensive pivot this entire game because there's a good number of Pokemon on this team that just can't touch the Bronzong at all. And so I really needed to stick around for a while, set up Trick Room, set up Stealth Rocks, and just be a nuisance to the other team. Because there's Comfey, which we've mentioned can't touch Bronzong. Garbodor, the only really option it has to hit Bronzong is like Payback, which isn't going to do much at all because Bronzong is fully defense invested. And then Mamoswine can knock off, but beyond knockoff, it's not going to be able to touch Bronzong either. And if it's a choice Mamoswine, then it could go for, if it goes for something like an ice move or a ground move, then Bronzong is a very, very free switch in. And if the Mamoswine is choice scarf, then Gyro Ball will even one-shot it because of the extra speed to the Mamoswine, which is super nice. We're also running Body Press just in case of something like the Incineroar switch in. If I'm expecting that and I already have Trick Room set up, I can go for the Body Press because that won't, then the Intimidate drops won't matter. It'll hit it super effective and it'll do about 50%, which is super, super nice. Stealth Rocks aren't super important in this matchup to me. It really only, the only things that are weak to it are Incineroar and then like Rotom Heat, but it's still a good chip damage. It breaks a Mamoswine Focus Sash, which is huge. And then it also just chips them down over time if there's a lot of switching out, which I could definitely see happening in this battle. The next Pokemon that I'll go over is Dragalge. Dragalge is almost certainly going to be my Dynamax Pokemon this week if everything goes according to plan, because a Dragalge and Trick Room should get me 3 KOs every single time, at least ideally, because with the combination of Hydro Pump, Sludge Wave, Draco Meteor, and Flip Turn, it can deal crazy amounts of damage because of its adaptability, giving it a boost to its poison and dragon moves, plus the poison bar giving even more poison damage, which is so much damage. I did the calcs, and like a Sludge Wave from this Dragalge does 50% to a Mamoswine on switch in, which is crazy because that's resisted, and Mamoswine isn't the weakest Pokemon HP wise. And so Dragalge will be slower than everything on their team, and it'll just be able to fire off hits. It hits the Comfey, the Flapple, the Mamoswine, and certain Rotom super effective, and everything else is taking a ton of damage from Maxus. And depending on what it is, this Dragalge, Dynamax, first turn that it's Dynamax gets the boost from Sludge Wave, and it's just impossible to stop at that point until Trick Room's over. And so the earlier I can get into the Trick Room, the better, which is why things like we need to find chances to switch it in or out, or if something's about to go down, we Trick Room right before it faints. So Flip Turn's also there just to get switch priority, have the momentum. It's nice if I'm expecting like the Mamoswine to switch in and I don't have Trick Room, or if I just want to see what their answer is to Dragalge so I can try and get rid of it before I actually use my Dragalge to try and sweep. It's also a very good switch in if the Rotom is Rotom Heat, Rotom Wash, Rotom Mow. Those three can all be pretty scary for the rest of my team. And so it's a good answer if they bring any of those Rotoms. The things that I need to get rid of if I want this Dragalge to just clean up the rest of the game, Garbodor is a threat to it because it can have something like Stomping Tantrum, which will do a ton of damage to me. I am fully invested in HP, but it's still not gonna appreciate the Stomping Tantrum. Mamoswine, if I'm not in Trick Room, is just gonna blow me back, and I need to make sure that it's not sashed before I go after it, and before I Dynamax, because if it's sashed and I'm Dynamax, it can go for an ISO Crash into an Ice Shard, and I'm pretty sure that'll KO me. Dragalge's HP and defense aren't that good. It's all on special defense, and that doesn't really help you against a Mamoswine. And so I really want my main goal of this battle is to just chip down the Garbodor and Mamoswine if I can, and then end game get a Trick Room up and try and sweep a Dragalge. Our next Pokemon up is going to be the Heracross, which was the MVP of last week. And this week it hits everything super, super hard as well, but it's in a very awkward speed tier where, depending on what they bring, it could be super good in Trick Room or it could be super good out of Trick Room. I have it right now to outspeed. I think it's capped to outspeed a Choice Band Mamoswine or a Mamoswine that's fully invested in speed uh, but not Scarfed, which is super nice because if I'm able to figure out the Mamoswine's item before I bring in the Heracross, I can decide whether or not to save it for Trick Room or to use it without. But this thing can also do a ton of damage. It'll live a Draining Kiss from Comfey, and then if I have a Moxie boost, because we're running Moxie this week, it'll be able to one-shot it in return. Megahorn just does a ton of damage to Flapple. Earthquake is the Garbodor, Incineroar. And then Mamoswine and Miltank don't want to take a close combat. So I can hit, depending on what Rotom they bring, I can hit everything for super effective damage with this Heracross, which is wild. And so it's actually, I'm not depending on it too much this week. It's kind of the same thing where it can be a cleaner in the right situation. And if I get a Moxie boost off of an Earthquake and a Garbodor, then we could be in a very, very good position. But there's a lot of things that outspeed it, so I don't expect it to actually sweep this week. I think it's more of just a breaker, see if I can bust holes open with it, because it does a ton of damage, especially if it starts getting those boosts. Next up is our other defensive pivot. This is Gastron, which is going to be really important for us most of the season because it's my only real reliable recovery on the team besides Leafeon with Wish. But Gastron is very, very useful, especially against teams that don't have a lot of grass options. This week, unfortunately, there's quite a few because Comfey, Flapple, and Garbodor all get grass moves, and then Rotom Mo could show up. I don't super expect it, but if it does show up, it's not the biggest deal for us. But so we're running Scald, Sludge Wave, Earth Power, and Recover on this Gastrodon. And so the reason I'm running those moves is because Scald and Earth Power are just super, super good in general. This is my switch into Incineroar because it can't knock off our leftovers because we have Sticky Hold. Same for Mamoswine, but Mamoswine I'm expecting to be running Freeze Dry, so it won't be the first switch in. Bronzong will be the first switch into the Mamoswine when I see it for the first time. But the Gastrodon's a great answer to Incineroar because it can't hit us super, super hard. Depending on the Miltank set, Gastrodon should be able to take anything that it wants to do. It can heal off Seismic Tosses. It can't get paralyzed. Miltank doesn't get any grass moves besides Solar Beam, so we shouldn't have to worry about that. And then if Rotom is any of the forms that aren't Rotom Mo, then Gastron's a very good answer to it as well because it'll prevent it from Volt switching in and out, which is super obnoxious otherwise. And it can take hits things like Overheat or Hydro Pump, even though we don't have the Storm Drain. We're not running Storm Drain this week because the only possible water type is the Rotom Wash, and I think that could show up, but given that I have 2 grass types on my team, I don't think it's that likely. Next up on the team is our Alolan Ninetales. We're actually running Snowcloak this week just because I'm so scared of a Snowcloak Mamoswine that I don't want to give it Hail. Because if I start missing moves on a Mamoswine, that's a very easy way to lose this game, and I really can't afford it. I'm assuming it'll be Thick Fat or I think Thick Fat's the most likely, just because I do have things like the Ninetales, which if I'm using the Fire one can hit it super hard otherwise. And I have other things that, I think the Ninetales will make it be Thick Fat, but if it's Snowcloak and they're expecting the Alolan Ninetales, then I really don't want to give them the evasion boost. And if they set up the hill with their Dynamax Mamoswine, then I have the evasion boost instead, which is super nice. This thing was kind of just the last thing I threw on the team. It's not great here, but it will hopefully scare the Flapple into not Dynamaxing, because I don't want the Dynamax Flapple. It's very scary, and it's just I'd rather see something like the. Actually, no, I might prefer the Flapple because I've planned so much for it. But like, if Flapple doesn't Dynamax, it's a whole lot more useless because they're generally hustle, and if they just start missing moves, then we're in a pretty good position. But this week we're running Ice Beam, Moonblast, Extra Sentry, and Freeze Dry with an Assault Vest. The Assault Vest is to help us with certain Rotoms like Rotom Frost. This thing can switch in for that, and it'll be super helpful. This is a nice answer to Comfey, just because we won't be taking super high amounts of damage. And if Flapple does come out, this will probably be my switch in. I know that it'll probably die to the Flapple, but if it doesn't go for an Airstream, then we can just hit it with an Ice Beam and do a ton of damage, especially if it doesn't have a Yachi Berry. And I'm not too concerned with letting this thing go down. I'm not expecting this to do a whole lot this battle, but it's there to put pressure on, scare the Flapple, and make it look like it's my answer to Flapple. It's not my answer to Flapple, but if I can make it look like it is, that's very good for us because they'll think that they can just sweep for the rest of the way. Finally, very, very important member this week. This Whimsicott is what keeps us from getting swept by the Flapple that I've been talking about so much. So Flapple, I'm terrified, and all my battle testing is the scariest thing. And so our way of stopping it is this Whimsicott. So if I see Flapple come out, I'm sending out the Ninetales. If it kills me, that's fine. We just bring in Whimsicott, and as long as Stealth Rocks aren't up and we have our Focus Sash, we can get a Trick Room off. And that's huge, because that means our Dragalge just comes in and just completely nullifies their Dynamax. Or at that point, Dynamax is over. But Dragalge then has 3 or 4 turns of just doing whatever it wants to the other team. It'll just run through the rest of the team, ideally. And so if Flapple leads, it's kind of obnoxious, because then, they still have answers to Dragalge. But Whimsicott's a great way to shut down pretty much any Dynamax, because I'll live one hit and get a Trick Room up, and then I have options to just stall out the rest of their Dynamax if I want to, in whatever way I want to. We also have Memento, just because it's a very convenient way to switch out of the Trick Room, because Whimsicott really does not want to function in Trick Room, and so you need to find a way to get out. You can also run U-Turn, but since I'm probably going to be at 1 HP after the Trick Room's up anyways, I figured Memento would be nice because I can priority it and not have to worry about being slower than everything else, and lower something's stats before one of my other Pokemon come in and hopefully, get a setup and just Dynamax against something that's not a threat at all. We also have Defog. I really don't think I'm ever going to use it, but if, say, Toxic Spikes get up and my Dragalge's already down, or if the Miltank gets Stealth Rocks up early in the game, I might just do it. But I really don't think Whimsicott should ever come in until after the Dynamax is over, or if it's coming to stop their Dynamax. We also have Moonblast. That's just to hit the Flapple if it does Airstream us, because we'll set up the Trick Room, and then we'll actually be slower after an Airstream, and then we can hit it with a nice Moonblast and do a good chunk of damage to make everything easier for the rest of our team. I didn't really want to use a Grass move just because Sap Sipper Miltank's the thing, and I don't think it's super necessary because nothing's really taking a lot of damage from Grass types except for Mamoswine. And Whimsicott does not want to be fighting with Mamoswine anyways. I think that's all we have to talk about for this team builder. I think I've covered everything that I want to. It's going to be a scary battle. I'm not super stoked up about our matchup, but I think it's way better of a matchup than last week against the Nuzleafs, because that week was absolutely terrifying. This week is just terrifying, not absolutely terrifying. But I wish all the best luck to Dolphins. I hope it's a really good battle. That's what I want more than anything else. I don't want a boring battle where one of us just sweeps each other. I want it to be close, because that's always more fun. And with all that, thanks for watching, and hope the battle goes well. All right.